Top Med Talk.
Well, hello and welcome to Top Med Talk here at Anesthesiology 2023. It's the annual meeting of the American Society of Anesthesiologists. I'm Desiree Chappell. I'm your host of Top Med Talk, and joining me today are my co-hosts, Mike Grocott and Guy Ludbrook. Gentlemen, thanks again for sitting down with me, co-hosting.
Absolutely.
Yep. So, Mike, wonderful meeting so far. I think we've talked about it. Lots of great conversations. Our last couple ones were super enlightening about OR sustainability and different solutions for ward monitoring, which are things that I think all of us are very interested in, huh?
A real technology theme and how much of what we do can technology take over in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I suspect may play into this conversation.
I think it's going to a little bit. I think so. So for those listening now, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about your background? You've been on Top Med Talk. You've co-hosted with me several times. You've taken a new role as my co-editor-in-chief.
The boss has left the building, and I've just been promoted to be your co-editor-in-chief. I've been working with Top Med Talk for 5 years or more.
Yeah.
And I'm an anesthesiologist, intensive care physician in Southampton in the UK, south of England.
And you've been doing this for a little while.
You can tell this by looking at me.
I'm just saying. I'm setting the stage here, Mike.
I have been
Go with me on this.
And I'm on the chair of the department I work in.
Yeah, fantastic. And Guy, for our listeners today, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, well, I'm the ringer here, I reckon.
Yeah.
I was brought in from down south. I'm an anesthesiologist. I work in post-operative care increasingly, drug development, economics, and just interested in the future, really, of where we're all heading, which is why today's talk is terrific.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. So here on Top Med Talk, we have all different types of discussions with key opinion leaders within our industry in the world of anesthesiology, a lot around technology, a lot around evidence and different things in play. This particular conversation, though, I think is going to take us in a direction that we haven't had many discussions about here on Top Med Talk. We have our very special guest today, Dr. George Williams, who is the Vice Chair for Critical Care Medicine and Professor of Anesthesiology at the Department of Anesthesiology at University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. George, thank you so much for joining us.
Desiree, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so when we were doing title checks, I had said assistant professor originally, but I think that's changed recently, yes?
Yes, I'm thrilled to be promoted to full professor. It's been quite a journey. I'm really excited about it.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Great news.
Thank you.
A lot of hard work, and I'm sure very well deserved. So congratulations to you. So, George, one of the conversations that we wanted to have here at the ASA has evolved kind of around what is the future and where is the field of anesthesiology going. And I know that there was a poll done with some residents asking if you could, what is the number one thing that you wanted to know about from people who have been doing this for a while and have insight into the profession. What is anesthesiology going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years? And as a career, what does that mean to me as a resident coming through? So that's kind of where I want to start our conversation. So you work with residents quite a bit. Is that correct?
Every day. Absolutely. I enjoy it. I was a former associate program director at our residency.
That's what I thought. Yes.
And we have one of the largest residencies in the country. I believe we're the third largest right now in the country with 30 residents per class. So we're growing, and residents are a big part of my practice.
Yeah.
Is very important to me.
Yeah. And I'm sure, as healthcare has been evolving and the field of anesthesiology has been evolving, there are a lot of questions out there about where we're going. COVID made a huge dent on our profession in, I think, positive and negative ways. Positively, we got a lot of press during the COVID years, and people learned about what anesthesiology was where they may not have known that before. Is that right?
I completely agree. It brings to mind an effort by the ASA that recently took place in the past 7 or 8 years, where we sought to make sure we use titles like physician anesthesiologist because we didn't feel that many in the public knew that we were physicians and what we did in the operating room. After COVID, with spots on Time magazine, our own president being mentioned in the White House press room, things like that, I think I had even family members reach out to me like, hey, you're an anesthesiologist, so tell me about. So I really think that our profession has really been put in the spotlight in a lot of good ways as a result of COVID. And I think that has long-term implications for not only how we're perceived, but our opportunities going forward as a specialty.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, their challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And their staffing crisis, as we hear, not only here in the U.S., but globally, as we've had other conversations around that, impacting the profession as well.
Absolutely. So, I mean, when we look at our staffing crises that are occurring everywhere, when we look at the fact that many of our partners are having to work early, late, post-call, pre-call, in perpetuity because of our staffing challenges, it does lead to some concerns, but it also, in a lot of ways, is an opportunity. Mm-hmm. It gives us a chance as a profession, as a specialty, to precisely determine how we can maximize our impact in a positive fashion for patient care. And because we would actually be the ones providing that guidance to determine that impact and where it would be, it gives us a great way to inject ourselves into policy leadership and protocol development for patients in the perioperative period in a way that I don't think that we've seen or expected from our specialty in recent times. So this is, it is a challenge, but on a systematic level, it actually can be. If we have the leadership, patience, and ingenuity to capture it, it can be an opportunity for our specialty.
Yeah. So my co-hosts here have been doing anesthesia for just a little while, a couple of years. And I would love your all's kind of opinion and thoughts on how the profession has evolved, since you started out. And so, Guy, I'll start with you.
Well, I go back so far that I remember the first pulse oximeter. So, let's put that in context. So I've got a bit of history that we can go back over. Look, what I've seen is an increasing understanding that what happens before the operating room and after the operating room is increasingly important. Yeah. It hasn't been a rapid or natural progression in my experience, but it's certainly gathering pace, certainly sort of down under where we are, both because we recognise what we can do and actually the opportunity in terms of job satisfaction that it provides. I mean, I can sit in an operating room and not talk to anyone except maybe count back to 10 from 10 or something. But the satisfaction of interacting with people and their carers and family is significant. It's not necessarily part of our DNA, though, as specialists and people have been around for a while. So it's a bit of an acquired taste. But, George, do you see movements like that or thoughts like that? And does it resonate well with the kind of people that we have in the specialty now?
That's a great question. I definitely see that movement taking place. There's not just intraoperative, but perioperative demand for our services and really for our expertise. Yeah. We understand what happens to a patient physiologically. We're able to provide, we're portable, we're quick, we're efficient, and we have to know everything about so many layers of not just the anesthetic management, but the surgical management, pre-op, post-op management. So once you actually open that door and demonstrate the flexibility and versatility of anesthesiologists in general, I see it as a great opportunity. I'll just give a case in point. An area of interest of mine particularly is with organ donor management. And historically, when it comes to organ donors, we said, okay, there's this ASA 6, and we're just going to come in and do our part. But there are, at our hospital, we were asked to do things like to declare when a patient may have cardiac death. So we can do donation after cardiac death cases and actually get more organs using our expertise on reperfusion and organ preservation. And so before we knew it, we had to create a whole service around that domain just because there was that need for it. Because at first I was getting phone calls when I'm walking to my car at the end of the day to help out someplace else. Now our department is totally injected into that process. And not just the intensivists, but general anesthesiologists have a great part to play in that as well. So that's just a small example of the wide berth that we're seeing in our specialty, and I think it's exciting.
Yeah. We spoke before about the residents. Are the residents prepared for that when they start, and are prepared for that when they've finished training? Or have we got a bit of work to do?
So I'm kind of biased. I love our program. I think we have the best program in the country. Don't tell anyone. Are we live? Oh,
we are live. Sorry. We cannot edit that out later. I'm keeping that one in.
Perfect. There we go. But I think when our residents come out of training, they're ready for that. I think the problem is once we get 5 years out, 10 years out, and we haven't exercised the muscles of the perioperative world that we took advantage of or took for granted when we were residents, then it starts becoming, okay, we have to relearn or make sure we brush up on those skills. We saw that during COVID-19.
Yep.
Every resident has to have several months of ICU time. And we had faculty that literally went through a brief primer by anesthesiologists for anesthesiologists for the ICU, and we're able to brush up and able to meaningfully help in tremendous fashion across the country. So our residents, I believe, out the door are generally ready. And if we can change the culture of our specialty to expect that readiness to be utilized in different elements of the perioperative environment, then it gives us an opportunity to continuously capture that skill set, that expertise that we collectively have coming out of training.
Yeah.
I think that's a terrific point, because our learning programs are usually terrific on physiology, pharmacology, applied. We kind of know it all. And then if we don't use it, then you lose it kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you get the sense that the people that employ us, our payers, the people that use us, are kind of aligned with that idea that that's where we will add value, or are adding value now and will more so in the future? Or is there some learnings to do there?
I genuinely think there's a lot of learning to do there on the employer side. We have many of our new graduates going into employed anesthesiology, not private practice, one group, that they own, for example, in many instances. And that's okay. That's the environment we're in. But the employer side needs to have an illustration of the tremendous business opportunity there is with that. And once that gets seen, I really expect that would really be captured on, because the group that's able to say, hey, we're doing more than solely focusing on the intraoperative part. We can offer you this. We can offer you opportunities to streamline things, come out of that emergency department and donor care and et cetera, and going bigger and bigger. Then that's going to be a more secure group with a better financial contract that's going to be more sought after, because no hospital would want to be left behind in that. And so the economics of competition, I believe, would spur a great deal of interest on the part of administrators once that demonstration actually takes place.
Yeah, showing the value of providers. Mike, how does this sit with you?
Really interesting conversation. But the balance between the in OR, in operating theatre activity, and the out of operating theatre activity, and the fact that outside the operating theatre, we don't necessarily have the financial setup, and we're also potentially in competition with other specialists. So other folk who may think they're experts in perioperative care, and to be fair, they sometimes are. But I mean, how will that play out in the next 10, 15 years?
Absolutely. The intraoperative part of anesthesiology, the billing system, the certainty and the time base that provides is really unique across the entire spectrum of the family of medicine. So as we go into the perioperative world and the non-intraoperative parts that we're talking about, we'll have to get used to utilizing those tools that our colleagues from other specialties have. However, there's funding and there's billing opportunities for basically everything we've talked about so far that are really capturable. I'll give you an example. A group reached out to me about a year ago because they realized, hey, we now know how to use gastric ultrasound and do a perioperative risk assessment. There are codes where you can bill for that ultrasound. Now, one at a time is not very much, but if everyone's doing it, you have a new revenue stream. You start talking about a critical care time. There used to be a fear pre-COVID of how are anesthesiologists in the United States going to be able to actually bill? Don't we have to have a fellowship and show a certificate, et cetera? And that's not the case. You have ER docs, you have nephrologists, you have everyone else billing critical care time. And even when it comes to floor consultations, even though it may be brief, there's opportunity to capture revenue there. So it will require our thought leaders, particularly in our business leaders, to make sure we're reaching out to our colleagues that have different backgrounds so we can learn how they do that. And I want to take the second part of your question, the competition part, the us with in the same pool as other people. I think the ICU part of anesthesiology is used to that in the U.S. And in my environment, I've had to see a lot of that. It's us, it's pulmonologists, there's surgeons, there's neurologists, there's everybody. And so in a competitive environment, it can be quite different, particularly in the intraoperative part, it's just us. But that being said, we have so much to offer and there's such a need for these services. On top of that, the competitive environment itself will, I think, eventually give way to the fact that there's tremendous opportunity, tremendous patient benefit. I'll give you an example in the ICU, only 30 to 35% of ICUs are actually appropriately staffed by a physician. So, every anesthesiologist in the country become an ICU doctor tomorrow and we'll still have competition. We'll still have opportunity to grow. And kind kind of like we become like the orthopedic surgeons who are spine surgeons versus the neurospine surgeons or OMFS versus ENT. You know, we kind of fall into that category suddenly. But I think that can be exciting too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agreed. I'm also interested, if I look at my experience in England and the UK, interest, a passion for perioperative care tends to increase as you go down the age range. So some of the older practitioners are less excited about changing their practice, whereas some of the youngsters just see it as an inevitable and welcome part of anesthesiology practice. What's the appetite here amongst the residents for perioperative care as a complement to anesthesia?
All the residents I work with are excited about it. They look for every opportunity to use all of the tools and skill sets that they've learned. I go to the operating room, they're like, okay, well, why don't I do we can start doing a novel block or a new ultrasound technique, or why don't we do this? Why don't we mention the ICU first and do this? Or why can't we create a space in the PACU to manage our patient? Their cylinders are firing, like you said, in dramatic fashion. And it's really for the rest of us to be able to catch up with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, perioperative medicine has really been a theme here at the meeting this year. I think we were talking about how many sessions. You actually just came from a session about perioperative nutrition, correct?
Exactly. Just presented upstairs about advances in perioperative nutrition and things we can do as anesthesiologists to really have a tremendously positive impact in patient outcomes, functional status, whether or not they go home or whether or not they go to a long-term acute care facility.
Yeah.
Our nutrition practice can, in many instances, impact that.
Yeah.
And we've shown it. So it's very exciting.
Absolutely. But do you feel like there's a lot of new frontier and just so much newness that we have to get into that it's a little bit overwhelming? Or do you think this is something that we're prepared to go into and really start doing?
Yes, it can very quickly become a kid in a candy shop sort of thing. There's so many things. There's that shiny object, that one, that one. So as a specialty, we are going to have to focus and make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction so that we can collectively take advantage of those opportunities, have systematic building infrastructure in place, have institutional knowledge as a specialty, as you will, regarding how to capture that. But in the next 10 years, I think anesthesiology will start looking very differently than it does right now in terms of the expectations we have for our groups, the expectations we have for our residents. I think there's going to be a lot of growth opportunities. And because there's so many options, I believe those will be positive changes. I think there will be things that we collectively end up agreeing on because we've actually steered that. We've chosen the elements that we really want to focus on the most.
Yeah.
We've been talking all day a lot about technology.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we do, particularly in the OR, if you think 10 years forward, maybe we're not driving our cars anymore because the cars drive for us.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was a patient, I'd be anxious that the anesthesiologist is driving the anesthetic machine. So which bits of what we do will be taken over, and where are the residents on that? Is that an opportunity, or is that something to be afraid of?
Well, I definitely see it as an opportunity, but that's a big change, and I don't think most of us perceive the extent to what that change will actually end up being like, and how tremendous it will be. I think that we started seeing the first tastes of it when it comes to decision support and opportunities for that. But right now, decision support takes extra steps. We have to use an app or we have to buy a specific device, and it's kind of a little clunky now. But like you said, in the not too distant future, particularly with the implications for AI and being able to quickly analyze not only our data, but groups like us and very, very quickly, and then implementing clinical pathways based off of that, there's going to be opportunities for us to really engage and lead and demonstrate tremendous value. I believe that our keynote speaker for this morning really illustrated that really, really well. I mean, imagine if we were saying, hey, we've noticed in our hospital system, or all the hospitals that have whatever EMR, we give, this dose of ondansetron versus Reglan. We find this happens in this patient. Everything will start alerting to us on its own, and we have to make sure that we are ready to incorporate that and lead it. It is kind of scary because it could be like, oh, this replacing us, but it's really not. We still need to be able to see the patient. I'll give a very brief example. Sometimes you go to an anesthesia machine and it says the MAC is 0.8. Well, they don't know if that patient, just drank a liter of scotch. They don't know if that patient is on amphetamines, and so can't. So there's that bedside intuition is going to be very important. But the chance to make it to where anesthesia is already the safest specialty, to make it to where it is almost unheard of for someone to come out and not have a great outcome because their anesthesiologist was attentive, used the tools that's available to him or her, and took great care of the patient. I think it's a really positive direction.
Our identity is often built on the art of managing physiology, and we're interacting with these human physiological control systems. Surely a device is going to be better at doing that? Question mark?
Well, that it reminds me of when I was a resident at University Hospitals of Cleveland. We went to the VA. In the VA system, this was I'm going to date myself. I'm so sorry.
Well, we've all
I graduated from my residency in 2009 and my fellowship 2010. And at the VA in 2008, we actually had a device. You may remember it. It actually would automatically infuse neuromuscular blockers and sedatives based on the patient's weight, body surface area, to get them automatically adjusted so that encompassing for first order, second order, third order kinetics. And that was a device that was so old, no one was using it anymore back then. So there is a little bit of the bell bottoms coming back into fashion again,
yes,
but with a new layer of extraordinary detail. But yes, your point is well taken.
But Mike, let me suggest to you that we already have AI. So if we're talking about AI as being a data collector and filter and curator, and me being at the point of decisions, I have a resident that very much kind of acts like that in a funny way, is that I'm still required to really make the call on the important things and not be distracted by the more routine stuff. I'm not sure that's a fair comparison, and I don't want to denigrate any resident because they provide much more than that. But the concept that we're still there and still important and absolutely essential, but some of the other activities really we can be helped with, maybe not completely alien to the concept of AI. But if I have offended all my residents at home, please forgive me. We value you very much.
Well, Guy, I think that your point is exactly, I think it's a fantastic parallel and illustration, because once we can reduce the decision burden of mundane things and identify those opportunities and to make it to where we can focus on extraordinary excellence on our preoperative management, that makes it better for everybody, particularly the patient. So I totally agree with you. Yeah. And that's with having even the best residents in the country.
He said that once already. So you know it. So
Guy, you've got to learn to say that.
He does too. They're all wonderful. So, as we go forward, do you feel like our next generation of residents, trainees, are going to be able to kind of keep up with things and really start to adopt and change maybe a little bit more quickly than some of us that have been doing this for a while?
Well, I think that they will have those tools because they see us dealing with those challenges right now.
Yeah.
But there's one challenge I just want to at least mention, because we've talked a lot about the clinical challenges, but I think that another front that's opening on the next 10 years and 15 years in the practice of anesthesiology is the expectation of administrative involvement and leadership.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a lot of interest in health systems now and physicians being in leadership of hospitals. Mm-hmm. Anesthesiologists are uniquely positioned, I would argue, because we're there at the hospital all the time. We interact with everyone in all locations. So a great CMO, a great CEO, being a physician that knows everyone, anesthesiologist, I think positions us in a way to where we can actually meet that. And we are already seeing the trend towards preparation for that with the activities of the ASA, with the certificate in business administration programs, with advanced and what they've been trying to teach. And even in our residencies, we're taking it as a more important element to make sure we're teaching about administrative leadership and professional citizenship. So in terms of preparation, I think the residents are seeing that launchpad, that runway being put out there. And I think it falls on us to make sure we clearly illustrate it to them, illuminate that for them, and give them that opportunity to be prepared when it's their turn to be where we are right now.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and probably really the future of where the direction can go. So, George, wrapping up here, what would you say the advice to these residents, to these young anesthesiologists who are thinking about where are we going in the next 5 years and how am I going to navigate this?
I would say be part of the solution. Come in with to this meeting, to anywhere else, with the mindset that These things are all in flux, and I am needed as a resident. My energy, my perspective, the same energy I had when I went into a room with thousands of other medical students applying for residency program positions. If I have that same energy and that same zeal, then I can be part of the solution to steer exactly how anesthesiology goes. And so I think that big message, that personal, not responsibility, but opportunity that each of us have, particularly our residents, is something that I would suggest that they all keep in mind, because we've talked about every element of practice being affected and changed in the next 10 to 15 years. And it's either there at the steering wheel, or we're just kind of watching the car going on the road aimlessly. So that's what I would suggest.
And you may be walking into challenges and barriers and things like that as soon as you go into practice, but there are things that you can think about and move in a direction that you don't have to get burned out like a lot of us that have been doing it for a while, right?
Exactly. If I could just mention real fast, we've seen the trend for new graduates to want maybe 80% positions, things like that. Yeah. That sort of steering where we go as a profession. Mm-hmm. That is actually saying, okay, they're making all the rest of us change. They are already providing that leadership, and having an opportunity to do it in a systematic fashion in a way that benefits our patients the most and preserves our specialty is really the opportunity, particularly when we educate the residents on how to do that.
Fantastic. George, thank you for a wonderful conversation. This has been very enlightening. If people are interested, if those who are entering the profession are interested, where is a good place to find resources to find more information about what's happening within the field of anesthesiology?
I'm not saying this because we're here at Anesthesiology 2023, but the ASA website, I recognize that websites are not really sought after. It's more Instagram and YouTube now, but the website has, if you log in with your login, there's all these details about what's happening economically, what's happening clinically, what's on the forefront, all throughout the ASA website. Many of our committees, like the committee I chair in Committee on Critical Care Medicine, we actually make products specifically and paper specifically for our members that aren't on PubMed that allow extra knowledge about what's going on. So I would strongly suggest, that's how I learned about everything coming out, is like digging through all the association websites. And now the ASA website is so good about that. I would suggest that as well.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you. George, such a pleasure. And thank you for listening to Top Med Talk. You can always find us at topmedtalk.com. You can find us on your favorite social media platform, X, LinkedIn, Facebook. We are there. I got it again. We're there. On your favorite podcatcher, you can find many of the conversations, all of our conversations that we've had over the years, a lot related to, some of the stuff that we've talked about today, and other topics that we're hearing about here at Anesthesiology 2023. And again, we want to give a huge shout out to the American Society of Anesthesiology for the support that they've given to us, Top Med Talk, over the years here for the meeting. We couldn't do this without you. We couldn't keep what we're doing free and open access to the world. So thank you to them. Thank you to our sponsors. Cheers, everybody.
Top Med Talk. Thanks for downloading Top Med Talk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, Top Med Talk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.